Hello, my name is Rain and welcome to my channel, Radiscus Fantasy Formula 1. In this video, we're going to discuss how I think you can win your F1 Fantasy Mini League or, your F1 Fantasy Work League or whatever you have, Family League, while playing on a lower budget. It is no secret that budget is a massive part of the game. I mean, the F1 Fantasy Tools budget builder has basically been our holy bible throughout the season, but we're getting to the end point of the season and it's time to actually start using this budget. And you might be sitting there looking at content creators or other people online's teams or other people in your mini league and seeing they can afford teams that I cannot. How am I supposed to compete with this? And I'm telling you that there is a way, and I'm going to show that to you in this video. If you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you get tired seeing my videos in your inbox after 2 weeks, you're super welcome to unsubscribe. I just ask that you give it a chance. And if you haven't liked the video yet, make sure you do so. Let's jump in to how you can play F1 Fantasy on a lower budget. So first we have to explain what's the issue, right? And to do this, I'm showing you my current richest team. This team right here has a budget, a massive cost cap, I should say, of 128.3 million. Now, I would say that this is slightly a bit above average. I think it's in the upper echelon of budgets I've seen on competitive teams that haven't just tanked their team for budget reasons this entire season. I would say that an average budget among the top echelon of managers is probably around like 125 million. But I've seen a lot of people sitting on like 118 million. And this video is going to be especially for you who is at or below 120 million. But if you have a really solid budget, this video is going to talk a lot about how to differentiate your strategy. So I think even if you have a high budget, you should definitely listen to the tips, because I do think you can gain some value from it, especially if you're chasing someone above you in your mini league. The reason it's important to discuss it now is, one, we're getting to the end point of the season where building budget is not going to be as important anymore, and it's more going to be about how can we get the points we need to actually win, right? You don't win anything by having a high budget, you win by having a lot of points. And right now, after the summer break, has really come a point where a lot of people, a lot of strategists, a lot of managers are moving strategies over to what we call the 4A strategy. What is that? Well, all of the assets in the game are divided into A and B tier assets, depending on their price. So you can see it as a premium asset or a budget asset. Sometimes you will hear me say something like a premium budget asset, and at that point, I'm talking about those that are in the 10 million echelon of price point. But the official cutoff that we know of is at 18.5 million. So any asset at 18.5 million or above is classified as an A tier, and anyone below that is classified as a B tier. So far this season, the dominant strategy and the meta strategy, meta meaning most effective tactic available, the meta team so far this season has been to run 1 A driver and 2 A constructor, or 1 premium driver, 1 premium constructor. The premium driver of choice this season has been Piastri. Now, granted, Lando Norris has actually outscored him over the course of the season, 500 points to Piastri's 489. But Piastri's much cheaper price has enabled him to be played with 2 premium constructors. And so far this season, it's been McLaren, and for times it's been Mercedes, but most of the season it has been Ferrari as the second choice option. And these 2 premium constructor combo compared with a Piastri, which has allowed you to afford that, has been the dominant strategy so far. But now, when people are reaching the likes of 125 million cost cap and above, we can now actually afford teams with 4A, 2 premium drivers, 2 premium constructors. And this is sort of what we've been working towards this entire season. So this team of mine, as you can see, can afford Piastri, Russell, McLaren, Ferrari, and then Sainz, Bortoleto, and Lawson. Now, I'm going to remove Sainz here just to show you a team with Franco Colapinto in there. This is going to use the cheapest assets available, or the CAA cheapest assets available, and those are the 3 drivers at 4.5 million, which is the floor. So with that, I would have 1.5 million in the cost cap, meaning that you would need 126.8 million to build this team. So Piastri, Russell, McLaren, Ferrari, plus the cheapest assets available is 126.8 million. Switching out Ferrari for Mercedes, which is also a very, very valid strategy, would cost you 122.2 million. And I think this is also a viable strategy to play as well if you want to lean into that 4A strategy. And Mercedes look at least decent for the weekend. That is so, seeing as the cheapest 4A team you can build right now, and I do mean the cheapest because if you look on the driver's side, the cheapest 4A driver right now is actually George Russell at 22.4 million, as Kimi Antonelli has dropped down to a B tier. Now, Kimi Antonelli, you could definitely slot him in there, and that could be your solution to this problem. You'll see you can build this team with quite a bit less than what I have now. You could build this sort of team with like 116 million. So if you think Kimi Antonelli and Mercedes sort of improve and Kimi Antonelli look to reach, the P3, P4, P5 positions as he has on occasion so far this season, you could definitely attempt a team like this. But I do think there's a more viable strategy that you can pull if you're at 120 million or below. Why do I not think this is a perfect strategy? Well, because if you were to ask me who was going to score the most points, Antonelli or Russell in any given week, I will tell you Russell every single time. And with this team that you see right here on the screen, I don't think this is the best team to run, because George Russell is just straight up improvement, and then you have the same drivers as the other people. Because what you can do, and the best way to play against the 4A lineups that will be running around, will be to differentiate your cheap assets. And what I mean by that is to essentially play the opposite of what the budget builder tells you to. So far this season, we have been following what this website says almost to a T. You look at the top of the tier B rankings, who's going to increase in price, and those are the cheap assets we've bought. But there are really good B tier assets that are on this list that's not going to increase in price. My favorite example right now is Isaac Hadjar. Isaac Hadjar at 5.1 million is a steal. He has the highest average quality performance out of the entire midfield, I suppose. And he's really someone who can qualify in something like P8, P9, and stay there and get a solid point score. And because he's not at the top of this list, most people who are building optimal teams will not have him. But again, you don't care about budget anymore, you care about points. And the main way to catch up to someone is to watch their downfall. Granted, you're going to need some luck, but the biggest point swings in this game, as you all know, are those pesky minus 20s that you get for a DNF. And if you're sitting there fighting against your mini league rival, and you're running something like this at 117 million budget, while he's running something like this, or maybe even with Ferrari in there instead of Mercedes at 126 million budget, you're not going to catch him. You're not going to catch him, because if Colapinto DNFs, you also get those negative points. You need to differentiate your strategy, and I think if the people ahead of you, or the people with high budgets, are running teams like this, where they're kind of locked to the cheapest assets available, you can differentiate yourself with a quite low budget. So let's remove Russell from here, and let's play with a team with a lower budget. And I want you for once to not at all look at the budget builder site. I want you to see what the drivers are saying, which team looks good in any given weekend, focus on those areas. And then you go to the driver page, you sort by value, and you buy what you can afford. Granted, you're gonna need one of the cheaper assets, I presume, but at that point, you might as well pick whichever one you expect to perform the best. If Lawson's in really good form, you pick Lawson. If Bortoleto performs well, you pick Lawson. I think Isaac Hadjar is the perfect example of this. Super low down on the budget builder list because he's going to drop in price, but you might as well own him when no one else is owning him. Now, I'm not saying you should rush and buy Isaac Hadjar just yet, but you need to pick drivers that you think are going to perform and not care about what they're going to do budget-wise. And you need to have different drivers amongst your four compared to what your rival has. So if all of your rivals are sitting there with Bortoleto, Lawson, sure, they look really good for price gains, and maybe they are the objectively correct option if Kick Sauber looks really good for that weekend, or if VCarb looks really good for that weekend. And if that's the case, of course you can buy them. But the way you're going to catch up is if the like of Russell or Antonelli or Charles Leclerc, because I've seen some rich people have enough budget to run Charles Leclerc as their second premium driver and not George Russell, which is we're high up there now in terms of budget. If they DNF or have a poor week and you do not have DNFs on your team, all you need is one. All you need is one of your four assets that are different. Again, stick with Piastri, stick with McLaren, stick with Ferrari, or again, if Mercedes is better, go for Mercedes for that week. Stay the same. Don't be differential in terms of your 2X. Don't be differential in terms of your 2 premium constructors, because I do still think that 2 premium constructors is the way to go. Be differential in your other 4 drivers, and all you need is one DNF across the board, and your drivers to perform equal to or close to the others, and you can still catch up. Now again, let's compare that 1-on-1, right? Say you have someone like Russell, Lawson, Bortoleto, and Colapinto, because those are the cheapest assets available. Say Russell has an average weekend for Russell. If you want to see what that looks like, we can just go to the statistics page. And scrolling down, you can see that Russell right here, 4th highest scoring driver of the season, has an average score of 23.4 points. So let's round that down to 23 points and assume that's what Russell scores each weekend. So Russell gets 23 points, and then you have one of these 3 drivers DNF. So on team 1, we have the 4A lineup, where you have Russell, who scores, again, 23 points on average. Let's just take his average score for now. And then you have Colapinto, Bortoleto, and Lawson. You have Colapinto on average scoring 1.5 points. Pretty terrible, but let's assume that's 2 points. After that, you have Liam Lawson scoring 5.9, and then Bortoleto scoring 6.4. So let's, for the sake of the example, take the middle of the 2 options, is the one DNFing. So let's say that Lawson picks up a DNF in this made-up race of ours. And let's say that Bortoleto doesn't pick up his, 24, 25 pointer when he gets the driver of the day, but let's say that he actually picks up the average of 6.4 points or 6 points. And Colapinto picks up a measly 2-pointer. Now let's compare this with a made-up team which avoids the DNF. For this particular example, I'm just picking random assets here. Maybe you go for Alonso, Isaac Hadjar, who we already discussed. You go for Nico Hulkenberg, who's been the GOAT, right? One slightly more expensive asset around that 10 million mark. Maybe this could be stretched to an Albon. And then let's just pick one cheap driver, because I think you would need one driver on the 4.5 million category. Let's pick Bortoleto here, because I do think he's obviously the best choice out of these 3 for the next week. So if you were to pick one of them, you would always go for Bortoleto. Now, I know he's the highest scoring one as well, but just for the sake of the argument, he is the best one as well. You wouldn't pick Colapinto over Bortoleto. Now, compare these 2 together and look at the statistics of average points. Now, this team, this low budget version down here, costs 26.7, the combo of these 4 drivers, whereas the top combo costs 35.9. So it's a nearly 10 million deduction in what you can. And I already told you that at 126.8, this is what you pay for this. So this is a pretty steep drop-off. You could definitely afford to upgrade like a Bortoleto or a Hadjar to one of the more mid-priced assets, like a Behrman, for example, if you're at 120 million. But you can already see how with just one DNF across those 4, and it's not even the usual highest scoring one in Russell, you are outperforming this team. You're outperforming the team above you by some margin. The total for this combo is 11 points, whereas the total for the combo below is 31 points. So, flat out, comparing this, one DNF has gained you 20 points, which it makes sense that it would, but you're also including a premium driver's type of points here. And now I know that the reason you own a Russell or another premium driver is because they can have those high peaks of 35 points, or above if they end up on the podium. But let's even change this Russell score to 35, and you still come out on top here. 35 points for Russell, I feel like that's a typical score if he ends up P3. And even then now, you are outscoring this team by a couple of points. So, the main way that you are going to win against people running the 4A lineups is to just be different with the 4 drivers you have alongside your 2X, alongside your premium 2X driver, and alongside your premium constructors. And again, this has all been done using a team with McLaren and Ferrari. That is assuming that Ferrari is the second fastest team that you want. That might not be the case, right? I'm very well aware as a Ferrari fan that things can go topsy-turvy for that team in a heartbeat, and suddenly Mercedes look to be the second fastest. And at that point, if all the premium teams are running this sort of lineup, that opens up more budget for you. Maybe you can run a Hulkenberg plus an Alex Albon as your 2 premium budget drivers. But what I'm saying is that you should stop caring about budget if you're on low budget and just go for the drivers that you think are going to score points. Now, granted, I've picked some drivers here that are, decently high, with a decently high chance of increasing in value. And if they do, that's just a bonus to you. But Isaac Hadjar, I think, is a perfect example of this. I can definitely see Isaac Hadjar getting to the 12, 16, but the high, let's just temper expectations a little bit and say maybe an 5 to 8 pointer even. And if that happens, that is a really good score for him. And also you just have an asset that's not on every other team. And if there are DNFs across any of the popular owned drivers, you will be benefiting. I know that this is a massive risk, right? But you have to play a risk, because if you keep playing the same drivers as everyone else in the top, but just one downgrade, you're not going to catch them at all. Like, if you're sitting there with Gabriel Bortoleto, you're sitting there with Liam Lawson, and you're sitting there with, let's say Fernando Alonso for now, and then your second premium driver here is with Kimi Antonelli, compared to someone with an even higher budget than me that could actually afford to get George Russell in here. I'm missing 1.5 million to afford this combo with Fernando Alonso, but you're not going to catch them if you play it like this. And I think at like 120 million, you have a really good opportunity of playing. I think Alex Albon is a perfect example. That's not going to be on a lot of premium teams anymore, because it's really difficult to afford. It's almost nigh impossible, I would say, to afford Piastri, Russell, and Albon. That's just not going to happen. So Alex Albon is one of those, and you see when he doesn't DNF, he scores 10 plus points every single race. I think Alex Albon is a perfect example that you can slot into a team like this, especially when you have the likes of Isaac Hadjar, Pierre Gasly, Carlos Sainz, all below 6 million. A team like this, using none of the 4.5s, is also, again, 10 million cheaper. It leaves me with 10 million in my cost cap remaining, so that would be like 118 million team, right? And again, maybe Pierre Gasly, maybe Sainz, maybe Hadjar all decrease in price. You don't have to worry about that. You are just worrying about points at this point. And if someone of the 4.5s or the other ones, if any of the highly owned cheap drivers that people have alongside their George Russells or their Charles Leclercs DNF, they also probably decrease in price. So at the end of the day, if things go your way, you're not going to lose that much budget compared to them. And you just need it to go your way, right? I don't think you can just catch it on raw points. Now, granted, with that said, there are going to be people out there who are absolutely crazy, with absolutely crazy budgets that can slot in teams with more premium budgets. You just gotta let those go, man. You are competing against the people like me, like the other people that are sitting around 125 to 128 million. People in that price range are the people that you can catch using this differential strategy. I don't think you should I don't think you need to worry about those sitting at 130 million plus. They're playing a different game to us casuals, okay? Do not worry about them. Now, to finish off this video, I do have to talk about the extra DRS, because the extra DRS is a chip that most engaged strategists still have remaining, and it's one of the most powerful chips in the game. If you don't know what extra DRS do, go and watch my chip guide video. Link to that will be in the description if I remember to put it there. Otherwise, just search it up. It's on my channel somewhere. But the extra DRS chip gives you a 3x. It gives you a triple amount of points on one of your drivers and a 2x on one of your drivers, meaning that you want to use the 3x when you have 2 premium drivers in your team. So if you're on a lower budget and you've just been doing what I've told you to do, then you're not going to get to that. And this is how you work around this. So you want to use the 3x in a sprint race, always. That's always the optimal play. And if you haven't been following my channel for a long time, I will explain this to you. But those who have been following for some time, you will think it's annoying that I'm explaining this again. But in sprint races or sprint weekends, cheaper assets or the midfield assets can actually outperform the premium assets, or at least be closer to the premium assets than what they usually are, because of how the scoring works in the sprint. So if it's a sprint race with high overtakes, mainly I'm talking Brazil probably, I think you should use it in Brazil. And if you don't, the annoying part is that it would be really difficult to remake your entire team to try and afford this. And also, you might not even have enough budget to slot in someone, and maybe you don't want to use the 3x with like Piastri Antonelli, right? The way to get the second best in there, because I think you do want to use this chip with like a Piastri Norris, or at least like a Piastri Verstappen, or Piastri Leclerc, or Piastri Hamilton. Maybe Piastri Russell again if Mercedes look really good. But you want it with 2 premium drivers. I think one way to do it is to go to Brazil, look at all the cheap constructors, and see who looks the best. Because let's once again assume that you're sitting with a team. Let's just insert the team that I just had. Let's say you're sitting with a team like this, and you want to figure out, okay, how do I 3x with this? I think the easiest way is to look at the cheapest look at one of the cheap constructors and see if they look good for that race weekend. Let's say Aston Martin looks as good as they did in Hungary. You go for Aston Martin, and that gives you more than enough budget to upgrade whichever one you want here to like a Lando Norris, right? To like a George Russell. You see, that gives me 11.8 million in the bank, meaning that you could definitely afford this at 120 million. You can probably even stretch to like a Leclerc 23.9. Again, definitely can afford to do this. And then you use the 3x, and then the next week you have an easy 2-move swap back to something like this, with I don't know, literally anything, right? So I think to use the 3x with the strategy I've just talked about, the by far easiest way to do that is to just run one cheap constructor for 1 week, where you use the 3x, use 2 transfers to get to it, and then 2 transfers to switch back afterwards, and hope that that's a good week for hope that that's a good sprint weekend for that specific cheap constructor. Since you can look at the sprint qualifying before making your decisions for the sprint, I think this is even better. You can see, okay, are they starting far back, but they look good on race pace? Have they been good? Are they in a good run of form? You know, will Aston Martin's form from Hungary continue on throughout the season? Then Aston Martin's probably the best option. Do VCARB look good? Things of that nature. Are they qualifying high or are they qualifying low? They have one each. You know, is Fernando Alonso P5 and Lance Stroll P20? Perfect. Get Aston Martin in right now. Because usually the reason why we talk about, you know, 2 premium constructors is always better than 2 premium drivers is that Ferrari, for example, get the points of both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. So why would you want Charles Leclerc just, right? You should always have a Ferrari over someone like Charles Leclerc, even at the different price points. Even at the different price points where Ferrari is 7 million more expensive than what Charles Leclerc is. But for the 1 weekend where you're doubling Leclerc's points, it's better than the Ferrari asset generally. Unless, of course, Ferrari get the fastest pit stop. But you know, I digress. So for 1 week, I think it's definitely fine to have that, especially if you're 3xing in a sprint weekend where that one cheap constructor looks good. So that's how I would play the 3x with the strategy I just showed you. But overall, that's the major point of this video. It's time to start playing differential. It's time to leave the Bible that is the budget builder guide on F1 Fantasy Tools behind. Will I do that immediately? No, because this team has the budget to be able to play budget and 2 premiums, right? And 4A. It also just so happens that for this specific week, Bortoleto and Lawson are the best budget drivers for price gains by quite some margin. So you want to have Bortoleto and Lawson anyway. And maybe if you want to play differential like I've talked about throughout this entire video, maybe you start doing that in Monza or after Monza, perhaps. And don't just jump right into it now when Bortoleto and Lawson look like such great picks for budget. But it's time soon. And I do think, for me personally, when I will be dropping off the budget entirely is probably in 3 to 4 races time. And I just won't care about it anymore. At this point, when I'm at this price point, gaining a few extra million into the budget right now could serve me very well going into the future, because then maybe I can afford someone like a Alonso or Hülkenberg alongside a 4A lineup, whereas that's not an opportunity for me right now. So because Sainz, Bortoleto, and Lawson look really good this week, this is the team I'm moving to on this specific team where I have the budget to do so. And then, you know, we'll see what happens. It just happens to be the best team for me right now. But I do think binning off budgets is definitely going to be the thing that wins a lot of mini leagues going forward. We only have 10 races left, right? So at what point the perfect cutoff of switching between budget and non-budget builder, it's impossible to tell. And I think it's gonna the optimal point, looking back at it at the end of the season, is going to be when the right and wrong assets DNF. So it's all going to come down to luck, as always, with this game and the massive swings of the DNFs. But that's how you play this game. You got to be differential. And for me and my rank gain, right now this looks the best. But I'm super excited to start switching to a more non-budget builder focus and start taking some risks with my cheap assets. However, that is not now for this team. But if you're, again, 120 million or below, it's definitely time soon, because you're not going to catch up to the people ahead of you. They're just going to keep gaining it. Especially now is the time for you to start doing it. because now is the time when all of these premium teams are switching to the Russell lineup, right? Everyone is switching to this sort of format, or let's remove signs and go for Colapinto, this type of format. So since everyone's switching to this now, we'll start gaining a lot of points on you each week with that Russell asset in here. Now is the time to switch, because you're not going to have a DNF across these 4 assets every week. So when that happens, you need to create the opportunities, right? You need to create the opportunities to gain points on them. So just start doing it now, man. Just start switching it out. Play 4 assets that are different than this. And specifically, I mean, I would look at who's in your mini league, right? See what can they afford. Can they afford this plus a Carlos Sainz? Maybe then that's what they will do, and maybe then you avoid the Carlos Sainz pick and you go for something else. Maybe you can slot the Colapinto in there if you need to. I would have picked Colapinto anyway. He doesn't look good for points or budget. Start looking at which drivers look good for points. I would say Isaac Hadjar. Great option for that. Both Haas drivers, great options for that. Both Aston Martin drivers look great for that. And then of course Alex Albon as well, who keeps picking up 10 pointers whenever he doesn't DNF. So those are the assets you should look at. I think it's time to do it now if you're on a lower budget, especially if your rivals are starting to switch to the Russell plus cheaper assets available. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope it gave you some sort of guidance as to how to play the end of the season. Thank you so much for watching. We're back on the channel. It's super exciting. The summer break has been long. The deadline stream will, of course, happen, as always, 2 hours before the deadline on Saturday over on Twitch and here on YouTube. And look forward to more videos in the week as well. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.